We are all moving in the same direction through our daily choices, both personal and collective. Only by promoting smaller, individual efforts will we have the power to affect greater, collective change, to ensure more sustainable and equitable growth. We, the public development banks, commit to cooperate, reinforcing our global coalition to foster responsible finance, promoting sustainable agriculture and agribusiness, fighting against climate change, protecting biodiversity, achieving gender equality, investing in private sector development. Join us to finance in common, leaving no one behind.
Welcome everybody, both to our guests that are here in presence as well as to the over 1,500 participants that are joining us this morning virtually. So live from Villa Aurelia, a Baroque masterpiece here in Rome, I would like to thank you for attending this summit. Finance in Common Summit 2021 has just begun, and as suggested by the opening video that we just saw moments ago, the next 2 days we will try to set new boundaries for the role of PBDs in the transition towards a more fair and a more sustainable world. Finance in Common is indeed a collective initiative. It gathers all of the public development banks of the world to align the global financial architecture with sustainable principles, so accelerating the attainment of the United Nations SDGs and of the climate goals while yet recovering from the crisis of the COVID-19. The initiative is promoted by the World Federation of Development Finance Institutions and the International Development Finance Club. This second edition is hosted by the Cassa Depositi e Prestiti in partnership with the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We will design the way forward. We will do it through the words of over 200 speakers that will come on this stage either in presence or virtually. They will come from subnational, national, regional, and multilateral PBDs, and they will be also key stakeholders, for instance, governments, regulators, United Nations, and private sector, civil society, think tanks, as well as academics. But your involvement will also be essential in the next 2 days. In fact, we would like for you to be engaged, and we'd like to do it through the polls and the Q&As that will animate these sessions. You can easily access these through the same platform that you are using right now to connect to the event. Today, we will start with the opening and then a plenary session, and then this will be followed by thematic sessions in the rest of the day. So without further delay, let us begin with this summit's promoters, and I would like at this point to introduce and to give a big welcome to the chairman of Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, Giovanni Gorno Tempini.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone, distinguished colleagues, members of the Finance in Common Coalition, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to welcome you all to the 2021 Finance in Common Summit hosted by Cassa Depositi e Prestiti under the auspices of the Italian G20 presidency. Allow me then to thank the Finance in Common Secretariat currently hosted by the Agence Française de Développement for its extraordinary commitment throughout this year. It has ensured the growth and strengthening of the Finance in Common initiative, as well as coordinating with Cassa Depositi e Prestiti the overall preparation of this summit. Also, I would like to thank for their time and commitment all speakers, partners, and promoters of the second edition of the Finance in Common Summit, starting from the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the World Federation of Development Finance Institutions, and the International Development Finance Club. The COVID-19 pandemic and the following socio-economic crisis has generated deep and enduring impacts at worldwide level, amplifying vulnerabilities and inequalities, and highlighting the urgent need to reconsider our development models. Public development banks have been very active during the darkest phase of the crisis in support of the economy, providing cash, guarantees, counter-cyclical investments that have allowed to achieve short-term objectives and to set the stage for the subsequent recovery. As the global macroeconomic outlook finally turns positive, with most countries bound to return to pre-COVID-19 GDP levels in 2022, there is the need to lay the ground for a more balanced, equal, and sustainable growth. More than 500 public development banks present at national, regional, international, and multilateral level are uniquely placed to do so by operating in more than 150 countries and by moving 10% of world investments. In Europe, public development banks will be called to be implementing partners of the Next Generation EU plan, an opportunity not to be missed. With its 750 billion euros, this initiative is aimed at strengthening our economies by providing financial backup to crucial forward-looking projects, allocating fixed resources between green economy 37% and digitalization 20%. Italy will be the first recipient in terms of absolute values of the plan, with approximately 205 billion euros to finance its national recovery and resilience plan. On top of that, 30 billion euros will be added through national resources. To facilitate the implementation, Cassa Depositi Prestiti will be promoting collaborations between European and national stakeholders, including the other public development banks well represented here today. This participatory approach has also been the distinguishing characteristic of the Financing Common Coalition. Its members have been working hard together on better aligning financial flows with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, coherently with the commitments of the November 2020 Joint Declaration and the COP26 agenda. Building upon positive results, public development banks convene today for a second time to reiterate their pledge to act as a single united system. With governments, international organizations, private sector, civil society, we can define the path to collectively shift our strategy and investment initiatives toward the critical issues of climate change, food security, and sustainable agriculture, gender equality, responsible finance, and social investments. Only by embedding and linking our investment strategies with these generation-defining issues, using innovative lending policies and ESG criteria, we will orientate financial flows to have a positive long-term effect on our communities and our economies. Cassa Depositi Prestiti is doing so by issuing innovative social and green bonds since 2017. This summit will also be the occasion to strengthen the coordination between Financing Common and other international relevant events such as the G20, the COP26, and the COP15. On October 13th, also thanks to the initiatives of the Italian presidency, the G20 finance ministers and central bank governor meeting recognized in their communique the Financing Commons Summit Coalition as an official partner, under which the public development banks, seen as critical partners, can report back on their needs and efforts through the next Indonesian G20 presidency. Indeed, without government support, it would not be possible to unleash the public development bank's potential to better serve public priorities. Dear colleagues, the future reserves many challenges that require, as never before, cooperation to be overcome. Public development banks should then come together and work alongside all stakeholders towards a greener and more equitable development model. I am sure that the next 2 days of discussions will strengthen our coalition and bring to concrete solutions to support a sustainable and long-term economic recovery. Thank you for your attention and my best wishes for productive 2 days of work.
Bene, thank you. Thank you very much to Giovanni Gorno Tempini for his inspiring words. And now, since we've officially kicked off FiCS 2021, let us give a welcome for our first guest, who is in presence on this stage, the Chief Executive Officer at Agence Française de Développement and Chairman at IDFC, Rémi Rioux. Welcome, come to the stage. You can come up this way.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody from all over the world. This is my great honor and pleasure, after Chairman Tempini, to open this 2021 second edition of the FiCS, the Finance in Common Summit, the global platform of all public development banks and their stakeholders. We are in Rome this year with the in-person presence of many colleagues in the splendid Villa Aurelia on the ancient Janiculum Hill. I warmly thank Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, dear Dario, for hosting so magnificently our summit in partnership with IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. I also want to thank very respectfully the Italian presidency of the G20 and all G20 members who, after the United Nations, after COP15 for biodiversity, after and before the very important COP26 Summit for Climate, recognized our movement last week in the communiqué of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. This is a very important step. This is an honor and a responsibility for our groups, since we will also have to report on our progress towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement by 2022, before the G20 in Indonesia. FiCS started only a year ago in Paris with a very simple idea: gathering for the first time ever all public development banks from all over the world and open the discussion with all our partners. We are joining forces not for ourselves, but to serve our governments and the international agenda with the private sector like never, with civil society in a respect of human rights, with donors willing to leverage our combined $20 trillion balance sheet, and with all interested parties. We are joining forces based on science. I commend the contribution of so many academics and think tanks that have participated our work for a year now and during this very summit. We are joining forces to strengthen the consensus we unveiled, we unlocked, and we succeeded in expressing in a very ambitious joint declaration last year, a consensus that we will measure again this year during the summit between colleagues worldwide present in Rome or virtually and represented by all the members of the FiCS coalition. Altogether, with the World Federation of DFIs and its 5 regional pillars, ALIDE, ATFI, LT, ATFIMI, ATFIAP, with IDFC, with the D20 Long-Term Investors Club, with all associations of public development banks, with the participation of all multilateral development banks, headed this year by the AIIB, we form a community of 530 public financial institutions, amounting 15% and rising of all global investments in 2020, public and private. And we want to provide short-term answers and long-term solutions to the historic and unseen crisis we are living in. For a year now, we were up to this daunting task, participating all international fora for Africa, for gender, for climate, for nature, mobilizing 14 thematic groups, co-investing, innovating, taking positions, patiently building a vast global infrastructure for green and sustainable investments. This is much needed, and we have to do way more to build back better and to leave no one behind after COVID-19. This is what Rome today and tomorrow is about, since all roads lead to Rome. Being accountable and take stock of where we are a year after, set new directions and strengthen our collective governance, share best practices and do business together. Enlarge the dialogue with all stakeholders, public development banks being the pollinators of the financial system. We are united in our diversity, progressively deploying the 2015 message, SDGs and Paris Agreement in all its power and promise. I form vows for the success of our FiCS summit this year and invite you all to a vibrant and in-depth discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Miriu. Thank you for your inspiring words as well. Moving forward, I would like to invite on the stage the Secretary General of the Financing Commons Summit, Adama Mariko. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, dear colleagues, dear friends. It's such a pleasure to be with you today for this 2021 edition of Finance in Commons Summit. I am Adama Mariko. I am a world citizen. I come from somewhere. I grew up somewhere. And I'm still going somewhere. And today I am about to talk to you about a little bit what we are about here. Yesterday, it was my 9-year-old daughter's birthday. And what I can tell you about is that she shows a huge interest for nature and has environmental sensitivity. I surely did not attend her birthday because I was about to tell you about today. And she shares every day a dream, which is changing a world. That's what kids do, right? Planet as one, and sharing all the commons together. She is absolutely not mad that her dad missed her birthday, not only because she knows that she will have a sweet present from Rome, but she is also aware of the interest we share here. That climate matters, biodiversity matters, gender matters, health matters. We are here to talk about finance in common. We are here to talk about people. That's what we do. We public development banks, we talk about people. Of course, I'm not here to share you just all my stories. Last year, we did Finance in Common in Paris, and we gathered many people. Let me read you the conclusion we had last year. The Global Coalition will convene the second edition of Finance in Common meeting in the course of 2021 to reinforce the high-level political support, to take stock of the first initiatives, to define a method for monitoring progress toward implementation of this declaration, and to validate the work program of the coalition. It was a huge task. We have come a long way since the last FiCS in November. We faced many challenges over the past year. First, of course, the long-lasting and devastating impacts of COVID-19 crisis across the world, putting at risk our collective effort to support development and progress for people's lives and our economies. Public development banks demonstrated the importance of their countercyclical role and answered the most of short-term and pressing needs for investment while maintaining a strong commitment to support the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. Then, the structuring of this coalition and setting up of its governance. The Finance in Common initiative has become the largest public development bank network in the world, gathering all international, regional, and multilateral networks of public development banks under a common objective. We made so much progress, just mentioning a few of them to you. Public development banks, investors, and other private actors are strengthening collaboration. The Global Impact Investing Network, the GIN, and the Long-Term Infrastructure Investor Association both signed the Public Development Bank's joint declaration we brought last year. On climate finance, Remy said it, the International Development Finance Club announced yesterday financing US $1 trillion for green and climate projects between 2015 and 2020. On biodiversity, the setting up of TNFD the development finance hub of the task force for nature, is a historic step ahead. It will bring additional expertise to the TNFD and coordinate the global public development finance. On adaptation, the collaborative is the primary vehicle for delivering on the new commitments put forward by the G7. On private sector in Africa, members of the FiCS Coalition for Sustainable and Inclusive Recovery for the private sector reach a third of their 4 billion target, collectively committing 1.3 billion in financing toward small and medium enterprises in Africa. And on gender, the FiCS Coalition on Gender Equality and Women Empowerment expanded and bring more members together to discuss measurements. Public development banks matter. We matter because we talk about people. Finance is about people. But we are all aware that there is still a long way to go. The COP15 is ongoing. The G20 Leaders Summit will take place the end of the next week. And the COP26 is just around the corner. We need to maintain our mobilization and to scale up our ambition. For this reason, we will run this 48 hours FiCS marathon with 5 plenary sessions to internalize political guidance and lay the ground for new concrete actions. Public Development Bank's database presentation tomorrow morning with a new report that outlines those rationales. 3 research sessions on agriculture with academic deliverables, 10 high-level thematic sessions, which goes deep to the sectorial coalitions on agriculture and food security, on climate, biodiversity, on gender, and will showcase innovative multi-stakeholders partnerships. I am looking forward to these insightful discussions, as I am convinced that they will bring further the PDB coalitions towards the SDGs, towards climate, towards biodiversity agendas. So please, spread the word, call your friends, your family, your colleagues, tell them to join us online. Our thanks also to COP15, COP26, Generation Equality Forum, UNDCC for granting their label to this summit and hosting the summit under their auspices. It's a big achievement. Our profound gratitude to the G20 finance ministers and the central bank governors for their appreciation last week of our collective work. They recognized the important role of public development banks towards the achievements of the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. As asked, we shall be accountable to the G20 and report our progress next year. During these 2 days, we will hear examples at sectorial, national, and subnational levels, which in where the public development banks work is most tangible. Of course, there is not only one way, and yes, the PDB way is one among others. But anyway, all the roads leads to Rome. From Rome, I say welcome. Welcome to the high-level representatives of public development banks. Welcome to high-level representatives of associations of PDBs, international organizations, of civil society organizations, which I thank very much for their constructive contributions in Finance in Common. Finance in Common is an open book for them, as we, as civil society representatives in the highest level of our governance. I also welcome representatives of foundations, of the private sector, and cities, academics, and researchers. We will hear from Africa, PDB networks, ATFI, the sub-national development banks in Latin America, the work of DFIs for small and middle enterprises. We will hear also from the Water Coalition, the FiCS Gender Coalition, IDFC, the associations for export finance, the Union, and many others. To you all, I say welcome, bienvenue, marhaban, benvenido, and so on. I cannot make all the languages we have in the FiCS because we have more than 26 countries being represented in these 2 days. But in the end, Italy will always win the cup, right? So I say to all of them, benvenuto to the rest of the world. We say hello and send our love and respect to Audrey Rushkoff, a brilliant woman, a friend, and former Secretary General of Finance in Common Summit. She built a huge part of this, and I know that she is online too. Many of you are connected to this opening plenary from Asia, Africa, North America, and Europe, of course. Benvenuti a tutti, sei di casa a Finance in Common. My expectation from this summit is high. It's for the PDB system to reinforce as a strategic enabler of the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement through performance, outreach, and impact. Our collective ambition is reachable. It's to increase our capital base and improve our balance sheets to have more impact on the economies and the people we serve. Our strong conviction is that all public development banks participating in this summit secure support and a voice in the global financial system. We used to hear that shall not start something we can't end properly and with manner. So let's do this properly. My heartful thanks to Cassa Depositi e Prestiti for hosting this second edition of the summit. Thank you Dario, thank you Antonella, Enrico, and your respective teams. Thank you Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, but this is not the end, it is just a starter. We will end it tomorrow. Grazie mille. Now, let's finance in common. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adama Mariko, for his powerful words. He has set the stage and has set the bar very high for the next 2 days in terms of what we need to do to face the challenges that are out there, but there are also opportunities, and so these must be taken with the cooperation. This is the message that has come from our speakers so far that we have heard, including the opportunities that were laid out also by Giovanni Gorno Tempini. So moving forward, and also happy birthday to Adama Mariko's daughter as well, who he is missing on a special day on her 9th birthday. But let's move on. The chairman of the World Federation of Development Finance Institutions is connected now with us virtually, Thabo Tamane. So I would give the word to Thabo Tamane at this point. He is, as Adama Mariko would say, somewhere.
Thank you very much, Director of Proceedings. My name is Thabo Tamane. I hope I'm very audible. I wear too many hats. I'm the chairman of the World Federation of Development Finance Institutions and also chairman of the Association of African Development Finance Institutions and CEO of SEDA. So it's not that I'm power hungry, but I'm just fortunate to be able to be given the confidence by other people. But good day to everyone and greetings from my home country in Botswana. I wish I could have been there, but because of the travel restrictions and because of the impact of COVID in my country, we are still in the process of the vaccination, which hasn't reached the herd immunity, as you may call it. On behalf of the World Federation of Development Finance Institutions, I warmly welcome you to the second edition of FiCS. Let me recognize His Excellencies, heads of development agencies, and partners that have supported and graced this occasion. But before I present my statement, I would like to pay my respects to the departed souls of the Italian country due to COVID. We watched very far afield how COVID affected Italy as a country at the beginning of the pandemic. And I would like to say to all the Italians, no matter the length of darkness, the sun will always rise, and we shall stand up again and walk proudly. We hope that the situation will soon revert to near normal as more populations, especially from developing economies, get vaccinated. On this note, I would like to once again add my voice to the call for greater support from the advanced economies to the developing countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Pacific towards scaling up coronavirus vaccination in those countries. Let me express our appreciation to Mr. Tempeni, the chairman of Cassa Depositi, for hosting this summit. And I thank my good old friend, Mr. Remy Roux, chairman of the International Development Finance Club and CEO of AFD, for his commitment to pushing this coalition forward. I recall our meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2019 on the sidelines of the World Bank annual meetings, where the World Federation of DFIs and IDFC agreed to work together with other partners in galvanizing public development banks and other development partners in the Finance in Common Summit towards scaling up solutions for the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. The World Federation of DFIs is happy with the progress that has been achieved so far since then, and following the declaration of the first Finance in Common Summit in 2020, and many coalitions have been ignited to push the elements of this declaration. No doubt, this has bestowed a lot of expectation on the public development banks in pushing forward the actualization of the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Let me call for increased mobilization and channeling of resources to support public development banks in scaling up the intervention. And while we explore innovative and sustainable finance for public development banks, I would like to call on countries in Africa and other developing countries to channel our special drawing rights, SDRs, from the IMF towards recapitalizing the national development banks. It is the right thing to do. We look forward to a fruitful engagement and on the outcome of the summit. Let me thank you and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Tuta Botamane. Another virtual Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Jean Likoun.
To Hill for inviting me to participate in this year's Finance in Common Summit. I commend your efforts to continue driving this important initiative by bringing public development banks together around the same table. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was established against the backdrop of the United Nations Summit endorsing the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2015 Paris Agreement. Our mandate is to support our members in their efforts to achieve both objectives. Sustainable infrastructure is essential for achieving the SDGs by enhancing access to basic services, promoting environmental sustainability, and supporting inclusive growth. However, achieving the SDGs by 2030 will require significant increases in financing across multiple sectors. MDBs, including AIIB, plays an important role as anchors for low-carbon, climate-resilient, and technology-enabled investments. We are continuing our efforts to mobilize additional financial resources for our members to support inclusive green growth and promote environmental sustainability. Economic growth and economic decarbonization are not a trade-off. Indeed, development objectives and climate commitments are mutually reinforcing. The strong, sustainable, and inclusive economic growth can only be achieved by decarbonizing and increasing climate resilience in the long run. AIIB is committed to assisting our members as they follow this path and to supporting them in reaching their domestic and international climate targets. Our target is to have climate finance account for at least 50% of our total financing approvals by 2025. Along with the other MDBs, we are aligning our financing with the Paris Agreement. In our role as the chair of the heads of MDBs meeting this year, we are facilitating discussions among the MDBs on pertinent issues such as climate change, health finance, and digital infrastructure. We are gearing up to invest in infrastructure for tomorrow through a set of measures, including mobilizing private capital to accelerate inclusive low-carbon growth for Asia. In 2019, we launched our award-winning Sustainable Capital Markets Initiative and other pioneering financing solutions to unlock funding for a green recovery. At a time when the world faces dual challenges of the climate crisis and COVID-19 pandemic, international cooperation has never been more important. To succeed in ensuring a green, sustainable, and equitable recovery for all, we must join forces to support emerging and developing economies, particularly those that are most vulnerable to the impact of climate change. We very much look forward to working together with the other members of the Finance in Common Coalition for the benefit of all our clients and members. I wish you all a successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to Jean Likoun for his best wishes for this event. And in closing of this moment of this morning, of this session dedicated to the FiCS promoters, we would like to close with this video message that comes to us from two participants. So Odile Renaud-Bassot, who is president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and Yara Pietrikowski, who is president of Forus.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. And first of all, I would like to pay tribute to the leadership of Rémi Rioux and IFAD at the helm of the Finance in Common Summit. And I would also like to thank Cassa Depositi, Prestiti and IFAD for organizing this summit in Rome. I'm so sorry I cannot be with you in person. By acting together under the Finance in Common umbrella, the public development banks highlight our common purpose as we strive to achieve our Paris climate objectives and the SDGs. The focus of this Finance in Common Summit, agriculture, is extremely relevant here. And this is an area the EBRD has been active in ever since we were created 30 years ago. To create sustainable agriculture, agribusiness and food systems, we have to achieve three main goals. To close the food gap to ensure that everyone has access to the food they need, to preserve natural resources, and to improve the sector's social and environmental impact. The EBRD is investing across 3 continents to do all of the above. We want to ensure that global food supply remains stable and becomes more sustainable. The world's food systems are, of course, interconnected, and governments, the private sector, consumers, and international organizations need to work together on strengthening such systems. Platforms like the Finance in Common Summit provide a way to foster dialogue and share solutions. International financial institutions, in particular, play an important role in mobilizing private and public funds and deploying them effectively, especially in emerging markets. We foster partnerships to fast-track the creation of food systems which are green, inclusive, and digital. We work together with like-minded donors and investors to help companies lower risks, lock sustainability into their business model, and increase disclosure. Climate risks pose new challenges and opportunities for the sector. Meeting the objectives of the Paris Agreement will require drastic changes in production systems, consumer diets, and land use. But by greening agribusiness, we can help it reduce emissions, tackle waste and loss, and improve biodiversity. Through financing and policy dialogue, we can also have a social impact in a sector that is still reliant on small producers and SMEs and accounts for a large share of employment in the countries where we work. We build inclusion components in our projects, creating pathways into jobs and training for young people, women, and rural population. Agritech is already transforming the sector digitally. We can help by accelerating the transfer of technology, establishing tech clusters, promoting digital skills, and strengthening the links between universities and industry can also foster innovation. And working together, the IFAs can make a major difference on these 3 fronts: green, inclusion, and digital. They can provide more and better financing along the entire food value chain. They can foster more coherent policies for the food sector. And they can create incentives to channel more financing towards ends that are truly sustainable. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, colleagues and friends, I'm honored to join this important gathering, even if I can only do so by video due to the time zones differences as I speak to you from Brazil. I represent a wide group of civil society organizations who have been engaging with FiCS since last year. In this second edition of the summit, your responsibility as leaders, as actors of change, and as decision makers in PDBs is even greater than in the last summit. Last year, you committed to act together, to achieve SDGs, to preserve its biodiversity, and to fight climate change, while these crises were compounded by COVID-19 pandemic. You developed roadmaps and agreed to work in coalitions to tackle key challenges. Today, the magnitude of the effects of COVID pandemic are still unknown. We have already seen poverty and inequality soaring. We have backslided many years on the achievement of SDGs, and the devastating impacts of climate change are being felt more and more every day. The urgency of the situation requires even more urgent actions. PDBs have a public mandate and thus have to act in the best interest of the people. And what the people are asking for is that PDBs transform the way they work to be based on human rights, community-led development, as well as climate and social justice principles. You recognized this imperative, but we are concerned that these might be empty promises, as progress in this area is still lacking. In too many places, we still see people who are affected by projects financed by development banks struggling to assert their voice. PDBs should and can be champions of truly people-centered development. None can tackle the current challenges alone or from an ivory tower. Thus, the Finance in Common Coalition is a really important space, one that can be at the forefront of this transformative change. And we, civil society organizations, together with the local communities, are ready to think about solutions together. CSO participation, including in governance structures and decision, is a key element for success. We invite all PDBs in the Finance in Common Coalition to create a democratic space for ongoing and permanent dialogue with civil society on how, acting together, we can implement courageous and ambitious steps to financing development in better and more innovative ways. The respect and centrality of the rights of the people and the environment and their defenders is not negotiable if we really want to leave no one behind. Thank you.
So thank you to these video messages. So a strong appeal that comes from far away but that hits close to home. This concludes the part in which we are hearing from our promoters, and it brings us now to the opening remarks by the PBD's regional network. So at this point, I would like to ask to join me on stage to the Chairman of European Long-Term Investors Association, Laurent Zilberberg. Welcome. Also to the Secretary General of the D20 Long-Term Investors Club, Enrico Petrocelli. Welcome to Petrocelli. And finally, who is joining us virtually, the Chairman of European Development Finance Institutions, Bruno Venn, that we should be seeing. Welcome. Thank you all three for being with us. So we're moving now to the regional networks. We have heard our promoters speak, giving strong, inspiring messages. I would, at this point, give the word to Laurent Zilberberg.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank Rémi and Dario for their long-term vision. We are long-term investors, but they have the long-term vision, and they organized the summit 1 year ago. It was the first edition. Now we have the second edition. And we do think at LT that this summit is a key rendezvous. It's a key rendezvous for maybe three reasons. The first reason is during the crisis, we as long-term investors, public national banks, we sustain the economy where the economy was, when the economy was stopped. We finance the economy. We help our fellow citizens to survive by giving them grants, loans, and guarantees. And this was needed. The second point was, and the second time of the crisis was to help for the recovery. And the recovery for that, to give the right momentum. And fortunately, we have deep pockets. And because of that, we were able to, once again, provide grants, but mostly loans and equity and quasi-equity. But this is not enough. We are now have to make the third time of the crisis. And the third time of the crisis is a long-term investment. And not long-term investment in any direction, but in the right direction. And this was said during the videos. We need to orient the investments in the right direction for green, sustainable recovery for the future. And this is why we are here together today. Thank you.
Thank you. Enrico Petrocelli.
So thanks for inviting so many partners and regional associations from all over the world to join the Financing Common movement. Oh, thanks so much, Remy. Thanks, Dario, for having all of us here. I'm glad to confirm the strong support by the D20 Long-Term Investors Club and to bring here today the greetings of President Werner Hoyer from D20 LTSC, together with all 23 members of our club. We represent the leading financial institutions with a public mandate from world's largest economies. And while our club is focusing very much on infrastructure development and financing, we share similar mission to the Financing Common Coalition. We are playing a bridging role between the private and public sector, and we are definitely eager as club with all our financial institutions to join forces with the Financing Common Coalition on the common effort of boosting private investments in quality and green investments, especially in developing countries. The D20 LTSC is definitely keen to mobilize both public and private capitals, which are greatly needed to accelerate the green transition, to achieve long-term recovery, to ensure reaching the ambitious carbon neutrality targets many countries are now setting. We know that this is very much at the core of the Financing Common agenda. And we definitely are committed to work on the scaling up of the risking mechanism, as well as on putting forward a very concrete pipeline of bankable, sustainable projects for development of infrastructure as an asset class. And in this regard, the identification of shared standards to assess the sustainability of infrastructure investment is crucial, and this is very much part of the common collective work that also the Financing Common Coalition is putting forward. We are partnering as the D20 LTSC as Financing Common movement and coalition with the G20. I want to thank you here once again, the Italian G20 presidency, for the important support that gave to the D20 LTSC as well as to the Financing Common movement through the G20 finance communique, finance ministerial meeting communique of just 1 week ago that put forward for the next year perspective of closer cooperation with D20 LTSC, with Financing Common, in mobilizing and putting together public actors, private sector, long-term investors, and we are all together in this endeavor, Financing Common movement, D20 LTC, all financial institutions, starting with Cassa Depositi, Prestiti, to mobilize public and private capitals to sustain a long-term recovery and a transition to a more sustainable development model. I want to thank you all. We are here to enjoy this 2 days program and definitely to contribute for the way forward to build even stronger Financing Common movement. Thanks so much to Remy, to Dario, and to all of us.
Thank you, Enrico Petrocelli. Let's move on now. I'd like to leave the stage now to Bruno Venn.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to speak on behalf of EDFI, and I'm very sorry that I'm not able to join you today in person in Rome. EDFI is an association of 15 European development finance institutions who promote the private sector in developing and emerging countries, and with a joint portfolio of $50 billion, we are risk takers and impact investors. I have 3 points that I would like to share with you. My first point is on collaboration. We have seen increased collaboration amongst the multilateral development banks, the public development banks, the DFIs since our first Finance in Common Summit, and as a consequence of COVID-19. But the key challenge remains how to organize this cooperation in an efficient and effective way. We at EDFI use, since many, many years, the follow the lead model based on joint standards and procedures. This works perfectly fine, and therefore I suggest to use us as a road model for how to cooperate closely, efficiently, and effectively for the benefit of all our partners and especially for our clients. My second point is on investment readiness. There's a great need that public development banks, DFIs, aid agencies, and governments join forces to create the investment and business environment for the private sector. Together with the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative and the Global Infrastructure Facility, for example, we have published recently policy guidelines to unlock private climate finance in emerging markets. We call on the governments, the public development banks, and the multilateral development banks to work on implementing these recommendations. And much more is needed in fragile states and post-conflict countries, especially in Africa, to create a regulatory environment that allows the private sector to invest. Without proper regulatory reforms, we will not be able to originate adequate pipelines of, for example, bankable private sector-led projects for the much-needed renewable energy. My third and last point is on impact. We need to measure and report on impact in terms of sustainable development goals and climate. And in doing so, it is crucial that we agree on joint standards on measurement and reporting amongst the public development banks, the multilateral development banks, the DFIs, and the impact investors. We at EDFI are working on harmonized standards for impact measurement and reporting and call on the public development banks and other DFIs to join forces to agree on joint standards. We at EDFI have a dream. Our dream is that joint standards on impact reporting will become an integral part of the international financial reporting standards. Let's jointly work that this dream becomes a reality. I'm very much looking forward for the discussions today and tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruno Venn. Thank you for being with us virtually today. And I would like also to thank again Laurent Zilberberg and Enrico Petrocelli for being with us. Welcome. So we are coming to the close of this first opening session. So with the last video messages that were sent to us by Philip Mills, the president of European Association of Public Banks, Carlos Linares, chairman of Latin American Association of Development Financing Institutions, and Enrique Florencio, the secretary general of the Association of Development Financing Institutions in Asia and the Pacific.
Dear Giovanni, dear Remy, dear colleagues, first of all, as a chairman of EAPB, I would like to thank Cassa Depositi Prestiti for hosting this impressive event and for inviting EAPB to be part of it. We are very pleased, of course, to be part of this second summit of Finance in Common. You know that the EAPB is an association in Europe which represents the national and regional public development banks and also the municipal funding agencies. We have around 30 different direct members, and we have a total balance sheet of over 900 billion euros. So this second summit, we have already seen between the first one progress in the way we exchange views, in establishing networks. So it is for us quite interesting to continue the work with you. Regarding the specific subject of the summit, to make agriculture more sustainable, it's a very important topic for EAPB members. Around 50% of them are effectively providing funding to EAPB members in order to make agriculture more sustainable. We have one of the members, which is Readiness Bank, which is the German public development bank specifically dedicated to agriculture, who effectively done that. All of their business is around agriculture. They provide funding around 10 billion per year, and they have done their first green bond issuance in the last year. We also do, regarding sustainable funding, more and more social bonds. We are doing social bond to finance, of course, social housing, to finance public hospital, to finance other social items. And so all EPB members are financing and funding more and more sustainable finance. We are doing 13 billion euros of issuance on sustainable finance in 2020, compared to 10 billion in 2019 and only 6 billion in 2018. The most recent topic for us is how the central banks, which are beginning to incorporate climate risk, environmental risk, will effectively do it and will effectively deliver on their prudential system. And we try to discuss with them and to have cooperation with them in order for us to maximize our financing potential and not be restrained by prudential requirements. And in that subject, I think Finance in Common Summit are very useful because we have a global database of how public development banks operate throughout the world. And so for Europeans, it's very useful to be part of a more global network. Thank you. See you soon.
Mr. Giovanni Gorno Trempini, Chairman of Cassa Depositi and Prestiti, Mr. Remy Rieux, Chairman of the IDFC and CEO of FSD, Excellencies at the opening session of the summit, distinguished colleagues from the panel, dear participants, receive a fraternal greeting from the Latin American and Caribbean community of development financial institutions that ALIDI represents on the occasion of this second edition of the Finance in Common Summit, an initiative that has brought together development banks around the world after two fundamental global objectives: climate finance in accordance with the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda at the north of our action. Meanwhile, in the short term, we focus on supporting an economic recovery that is sustainable and deeply social, given the deficiencies and differences that this pandemic has revealed. This cohesion is very important because beyond our particularities and geographic priorities, continental or national, it shows us a global direction and establishes a forum in which at the global scale our financial institutions can learn from each other, share good practices, discuss problems, and promote innovations in order to mainstream methodologies and fundamentals around the financing of productive, social, and environmental sectors. In this context, the movement objectives are reflected in turn in a diversity of concrete aspects that currently constitute different thematic coalitions of the initiative, such as water and sanitation, gender equality, social investment, sustainable financing of food systems, among other study and action groups, each of them with ambitious but realistic roadmaps and work streams that help us to update our internal banking agendas. As policy-based institutions for the financing of development, we are pleased that the movement and its summits have the support at the highest political level. This is undoubtedly very important in relation to the validity and projection of development banks and their role in the global development agendas. The greater focus on our institutions will also demand more results, so the participation of the international cooperation in support of the strengthening of banking capacities will also be of the greatest importance. Dear friends, on behalf of the Latin American and Caribbean community of development financial institutions that ALIDI represents, I wish to renew our support to the Finance in Common movement and our efforts to work towards its objectives. This support must be materialized through participation in disciplinary bodies such as the Steering Committee, thematic coalitions, and the summit itself. The endorsement of its different statements, the contribution to the work programs and work streams by participating in their activities or leading some, and in general promoting the involvement of our community of financial institutions in the financing common activities. In this sense, allow me to invoke the attending institutions and their leaders to continue supporting this initiative by making ourselves available in whatever is deemed necessary, and in our bank networks to promote synergies with our own work programs towards the common objectives. Wishing everybody a successful and fruitful Finance in Common 2021 meeting, receive a very cordial greeting from Latin America. Thank you.
distinguished guests, participants, warm greetings from the Philippines. On behalf of the Association of Development Financing Institutions in Asia and the Pacific, I wish to thank and welcome you all for taking your time to join the second edition of Finance in Common Summit. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers for an excellent and organized conference that was rich in content. The first edition of the Finance in Common Summit last year underscored the crucial role of public development banks in reconciling short-term counter-cyclical responses with sustainable recovery measures that will have a long-term impact on the planet and societies. For this summit, the objective is to issue a joint declaration declaring the public development bank's willingness to contribute actively to the recovery while aligning with sustainable finance principles and incorporate the goals of the Paris Agreement, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the 2030 Agenda into their business strategy, operations, and processes. It is in this context that at FIAP, through its Greening of DFIs initiative, which started from within the associations about 20 years ago, and as our commitment to sustainable development leads our members to undertake projects that are economically viable, environmentally friendly, socially responsible, and under the ambit of good governance. Public development banks are uniquely positioned to play a leading role in this transformation, and so our shared responsibility is equally clear. Redouble our efforts to recover from the economic and social crisis, and second, get on track to achieve the SDGs and build a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient future. I wish to take this opportunity to convey my best wishes for an effective, successful, and productive Finance in Common Summit second edition. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you to Philip Mills, Carlos Linares, and Enrique Florencio for these messages. At this point, please let me take a minute to say thank you also to our partners that have supported and promoted the summit, making it possible. Also, we'd like to thank them for sharing the same vision that we have. Now that we have shared the objectives of this Financing Common Summit 2021, it's time to define better what should be the role of the finance and public development banks in order to promote the sustainable development and the sustainable agricultural world. So I am pleased at this point to introduce the Director of Sustainable Production, Markets and Institutions of IFAD, Turaya Triki, who will be joining us on stage and will be moderating the next panel. Welcome to Turaya Triki.